Die Hard almost never happened the way we know it. A classic action movie born from a nightmare, almost starring Clint Eastwood, and even offered to Frank Sinatra. But that's just the beginning. Today, we're diving into the wildest facts, shocking behind-the-scenes decisions, and unexpected twists that turned Die Hard into an action masterpiece. Are you ready? Let's go. A nightmare that created an action masterpiece. It all began with a dream, an intense, pulse-pounding nightmare that would unexpectedly give birth to one of the greatest action films ever made. In 1974, author Roderick Thorp watched The Towering Inferno, a disaster film about a skyscraper consumed by fire. That night, his mind took the chaos of the film and twisted it into something even more terrifying. In his dream, a lone man was being hunted through a towering high-rise by ruthless gunmen, fighting for survival with no way out. When he woke up, the vision stuck with him. Instead of dismissing it as just another bad dream, Thorpe turned the idea into a novel, Nothing Lasts Forever, published in 1979. But here's the surprising part: this wasn't just any novel, it was actually a sequel to his 1966 book The Detective, which had already been made into a movie starring Frank Sinatra. That means Die Hard technically started as a follow-up to an entirely different story. Before Hollywood even got involved, Die Hard was already in motion, born from one writer's nightmare and destined to redefine action cinema forever. Clint Eastwood, the Die Hard that almost was. Try to picture it, Clint Eastwood as John McClane. Sounds crazy? Well, it almost happened. In the early 1980s, Eastwood actually owned the film rights to Nothing Lasts Forever and had every intention of turning it into a movie, with himself in the lead role. It was right up his alley, a lone hero, outnumbered but never outmatched, taking on a group of ruthless villains. But despite having the rights in his hands, Eastwood never moved forward with the project. Maybe the timing wasn't right. Maybe the story didn't feel like a good fit. Or maybe he just wasn't interested anymore. Whatever the reason, he walked away, leaving the door open for someone else. If Eastwood had gone ahead with his version, Die Hard could have been an entirely different film, darker, grittier, and perhaps without the sharp humor and everyman charm that Bruce Willis ultimately brought to the role. It remains one of the biggest what-if moments in Hollywood history. Would Die Hard have been just as legendary? Or would it have faded into obscurity? We'll never know. Frank Sinatra's unexpected link to Die Hard. Now, here's a twist no one saw coming. Before Bruce Willis, before Clint Eastwood, Die Hard was first offered to Frank Sinatra. Yes, that Frank Sinatra. And believe it or not, the studio had no choice. Because Nothing Lasts Forever was a sequel to The Detective, a 1968 film in which Sinatra starred, the contract required that he be given the first shot at reprising the lead role. But there was a small problem. Sinatra was 73 years old. Imagine it, blue eyes running through a high-rise, dodging bullets, leaping from explosions, and cracking wise under pressure. Yeah, even he knew that wasn't going to work. Without hesitation, he declined the role, and the search for John McClane continued. That decision paved the way for Bruce Willis, a TV actor known mostly for his work in romantic comedies. At the time, he wasn't considered an action star at all, but sometimes, the best choices are the least expected. In the end, Sinatra's refusal set off a chain reaction that led to one of the greatest action films of all time. Bruce Willis, the accidental action hero Bruce Willis as John McClane? That wasn't the studio's plan, far from it. When Die Hard was in development, the producers had their eyes on big-name action stars, the kind of tough guys who had already cemented their status in Hollywood. Their wish list? A lineup of legends: Sylvester Stallone, Harrison Ford, Robert De Niro, Charles Bronson, Nick Nolte, Mel Gibson, Richard Gere, Don Johnson, Burt Reynolds, and even Richard Dean Anderson. Each one was approached, and each one said no. Maybe they didn't like the script. Maybe they didn't see the potential. Or maybe the idea of spending an entire movie running barefoot over broken glass just wasn't appealing. Whatever the reason, one by one, they all passed. Desperate for a lead, the studio turned to an unlikely candidate, Bruce Willis, a TV actor known mostly for his role in the romantic comedy series Moonlighting. He was the last person anyone expected to become an action star. But when every other option failed, Willis got his shot. And as it turns out, Hollywood's last choice became one of the most iconic action heroes of all time. The villain that almost wasn't, Hans Gruber's alternate casting. Hans Gruber. Suave, sophisticated, and utterly ruthless. Alan Rickman's performance in Die Hard didn't just make him one of cinema's most unforgettable villains, it redefined what an action movie antagonist could be. But here's the twist, he wasn't the studio's first pick. Before Rickman was even in the picture, the role was offered to Sam Neill, known for his work in The Omen and later Jurassic Park. The producers thought Neill had the right mix of charm and menace, but he turned it down. That left them scrambling. Then, by sheer luck, they saw Alan Rickman in a stage production of Dangerous Liaisons. His commanding presence, his icy delivery, his ability to make every word drip with both elegance and threat, he was perfect. And yet, Rickman had never done a movie before. In fact, he was hesitant to take the role, worried that Hollywood wouldn't be for him. But when he finally agreed, he didn't just play Hans Gruber, he became him. And just like that, Die Hard found its perfect villain. The studio didn't trust Bruce Willis. It's hard to imagine now, but back in the late 80s, Bruce Willis wasn't seen as an action star. He was funny, charming, and known mostly for his work on Moonlighting, a TV show that was nothing like Die Hard. So when he was cast as John McClane, the studio panicked. They worried audiences wouldn't take him seriously. They doubted his ability to carry an action blockbuster. And they were so unsure of their decision that they hid him from the marketing. The first posters for Die Hard barely featured Bruce Willis at all. Instead, they focused on Nakatomi Plaza, the towering skyscraper where all the action unfolds. The message was clear, come for the explosions, not for the guy starring in the movie. But when Die Hard hit theaters and became a massive hit, everything changed. Suddenly, Bruce Willis was the face of the movie. The posters were redesigned, his image was front and center, and Hollywood had a brand new action hero. The studio may not have believed in him at first, but the audience did, and that's what really mattered. Bruce Willis's record-breaking Paycheck. Bruce Willis wasn't the studio's first choice for Die Hard, but he walked away with something no one saw coming, one of the biggest paychecks in Hollywood at the time. When Willis was finally cast as John McClane, the studio was desperate. Every major action star had turned down the role, and with production set to begin, they needed a lead, fast. Willis's agent saw the opportunity and made a bold move. He negotiated a staggering $5 million salary. To put that in perspective, this was the kind of payday reserved for Hollywood's elite, actors like Tom Cruise or Sylvester Stallone. At the time, Willis was still mostly known for Moonlighting, a TV show, and studios rarely paid television actors that kind of money. But the gamble paid off. Die Hard turned him into a global superstar, and the $5 million bet proved to be one of the best investments in movie history. The best part? By the time the sequels rolled around, his paycheck only got bigger. Alan Rickman, from the stage to the big screen. It's hard to believe, but Alan Rickman had never acted in a movie before Die Hard. That's right, Hans Gruber, one of the most iconic villains in cinema history, was Rickman's very first film role. Before stepping onto the Die Hard set, Rickman was primarily a theater actor, known for his commanding stage presence and sophisticated performances in London's West End. He had done some television work, but Hollywood? That was completely new territory. When he was offered the role of Hans Gruber, he was hesitant. An action movie? In Los Angeles? It wasn't exactly what he had envisioned for his career. But after reading the script, and realizing that Gruber wasn't just a one-dimensional bad guy, he took the risk. And within minutes of his first scene, he stole the show. His smooth, intelligent, and calculated performance turned Gruber into a villain unlike any seen before. It was the perfect mix of charm and menace, making him unforgettable. And just like that, Alan Rickman became a Hollywood legend. The director who refused to make a terrorist movie before Die Hard became the thrilling, action-packed blockbuster we know today. It almost took a much darker turn. Director John McTiernan actually turned down the project multiple times. Why? Because he hated the script. In its early drafts, Die Hard was a bleak, cynical story about cold-blooded terrorists, not the fun, high-stakes heist film we ended up with. In an interview, McTiernan explained, the original screenplay was a grim terrorist movie. I said, guys, there's no part of terrorism that's fun. Robbers are fun bad guys. Let's make this a date movie. Yes, you heard that right. A date movie. He wanted the film to be entertaining, something that couples could enjoy together, not a heavy, politically charged thriller. The studio was skeptical, but McTiernan stuck to his vision. He turned the terrorists into charismatic thieves, injected humor into the script, and focused on making McClane a relatable, everyman hero rather than an unstoppable action machine. The result? A film that didn't just redefine action movies, it became one of the greatest of all time. From 3 days to 1 night, the time crunch that changed Die Hard. Believe it or not, Die Hard was originally supposed to take place over 3 days. The early script had John McClane slowly working his way through Nakatomi Plaza, stretching the tension out across an entire weekend. But director John McTiernan had a different vision. He wanted the movie to feel urgent, like a relentless roller coaster ride with no time to breathe. His inspiration? Shakespeare. Specifically, A Midsummer Night's Dream, which takes place over a single, magical evening. McTiernan insisted that Die Hard follow the same structure, condensing all the action into one intense, heart-pounding night. This decision turned out to be a game-changer. Instead of a slow, drawn-out thriller, the film became a high-octane sprint where every second mattered. The stakes felt higher, the tension never let up, and McClane's desperation became real, because he wasn't fighting for survival over days, he was fighting to make it out before dawn. The result? One of the most perfectly paced action movies ever made. The secret behind Nakatomi Plaza, the towering, glass-walled fortress where Die Hard takes place, is one of the most iconic locations in action movie history. But here's something most people don't realize, it's not a Hollywood set. It's a real building, and not just any building, it's the actual corporate headquarters of 20th Century Fox, the very studio that produced the film. At the time, Fox was still constructing its brand new office tower in Los Angeles, and the filmmakers saw an opportunity. Why spend millions building an expensive set when they had a perfectly good skyscraper at their disposal? The studio agreed, but in a bizarre twist, Fox ended up charging itself rent to use its own building. The unfinished floors gave the movie an authentic, under-construction look, and the film crew had free rein to stage massive explosions, shoot up the interiors, and even dangle stuntmen from the roof. The best part? If you visit Los Angeles today, you can still see Nakatomi Plaza, only now, it's known as Fox Plaza. The accidental stunt that made the final cut. Some of the most intense moments in Die Hard weren't planned, and one of them was downright terrifying. Remember the scene where John McClane is dangling inside the ventilation shaft, trying to grab onto an air vent before he falls? That wasn't acting. It was a real, on-set accident. The stunt was supposed to be simple. The stuntman playing McClane was meant to smoothly grab the first vent and pull himself up. But something went wrong. He missed. Instead of catching himself, he slipped, and plummeted much further than planned. The moment of sheer panic on his face? 100% real. Thankfully, the safety rigging caught him, and he wasn't injured. But the shot looked so genuine, so heart-stopping, that McTiernan decided to leave it in the final cut. That split-second mistake ended up becoming one of the most memorable, and most intense, scenes in the entire film. Alan Rickman's terrifying fall, a trick that worked too well. Hans Gruber's final moment, plunging from the top of Nakatomi Plaza, remains one of the most unforgettable villain deaths in movie history. But here's what most people don't know, Alan Rickman's look of shock wasn't acting. It was real. To film the scene, Rickman had to drop 20 feet onto an airbag, all while maintaining Gruber's sinister composure. The stunt team assured him he would be released on the count of 3, giving him time to brace himself. But in a sneaky move to capture genuine terror, the crew dropped him on the count of 2. Rickman wasn't ready, his body instinctively recoiled, his arms flailed slightly, and the sheer panic on his face was authentic. That was the take director John McTiernan used in the final cut. The trick worked so well that it cemented Hans Gruber's demise as one of the greatest villain send-offs in Hollywood history. Bruce Willis's hearing loss. The price of action movies come with their fair share of risks, but for Bruce Willis, Die Hard left behind a permanent scar, one he would carry for the rest of his life. To make the gunfire feel more realistic, the film's blanks were modified to be extra loud. The result? A more intense soundscape for the audience, but also a serious hazard for the actors. During one of the film's most intense moments, McClane fires his gun in a confined space, causing an ear-splitting explosion of sound. Willis didn't realize it at the time, but the damage was done. Years later, he admitted, due to an accident on the first Die Hard, I suffered 2/3 partial hearing loss in my left ear. That single scene cost him a lifetime of reduced hearing. It's a painful reminder of how much actors put on the line, sometimes without even knowing it, just to bring us the perfect shot. Alan Rickman versus the American accent, a battle he couldn't win. Hans Gruber was the definition of a cool, calculated villain, but there was one moment where Alan Rickman struggled, his fake American accent. Midway through the film, Gruber pretends to be an innocent hostage to deceive McClane, and director John McTiernan decided to make it a test of Rickman's acting skills. The problem? Rickman's attempt at an American accent just wasn't working. McTiernan later confessed, I shot it 3 times, trying to get him to sound more American. He just had terrible trouble with the accent. Despite Rickman's best efforts, his British intonations kept creeping in, making it one of the few times Hans Gruber wasn't in total control. In the end, the scene worked, partly because McClane was already suspicious. But behind the scenes, it was proof that even the most talented actors have their limits. Hans Gruber's German was mostly nonsense. Hans Gruber may have been a cold, calculating mastermind, but when it came to his German, things were a little less intimidating. Alan Rickman's accent was flawless, but most of the German dialogue spoken by Gruber and his henchmen was complete gibberish. The film's writers didn't exactly consult a language expert, so what was supposed to be menacing orders in German often ended up as a mix of nonsensical phrases and awkwardly translated lines. It was so bad that when Die Hard was released in Germany, the characters were no longer referred to as German terrorists. Instead, Gruber and his gang were rebranded as generic European criminals to avoid confusion, and possibly embarrassment. Of course, for most audiences, it didn't matter. Rickman's performance was so strong that even if he had been reciting a cookbook in broken German, he still would have been one of the most iconic villains in movie history. Bruce Willis's secret weapon, fake feet running barefoot over broken glass. Sounds like a nightmare. But Bruce Willis had a trick up his sleeve, or rather, under his feet. In the now iconic scene where John McClane is forced to sprint across shattered glass, Willis wasn't actually putting his bare skin at risk. Instead, he wore specially designed rubber prosthetic feet, essentially, fake feet that fit over his own like a pair of shoes. If you watch closely in certain shots, you can even see the outline of these artificial feet, slightly larger than his real ones. Despite the clever trick, the scene still looks brutally painful, adding to McClane's everyman struggle. The combination of Willis's acting, clever camera angles, and those hidden rubber soles made it one of the most intense and memorable moments in action movie history. McClane's dirty vest is now in a museum. It's sweaty. It's blood-stained. It's torn to shreds. And believe it or not, it's sitting in a museum. That's right, John McClane's iconic, grime-covered undershirt from Die Hard has been officially recognized as a piece of American history. In 2007, Bruce Willis donated the now legendary tank top to the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, where it joined other cinematic artifacts like Dorothy's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz and Indiana Jones' fedora. What makes it so special? Die Hard redefined the action genre, and McClane's filthy, sweat-soaked undershirt became a symbol of the everyman hero, tired, beaten down, but never giving up. It might not be the most glamorous movie costume, but for action fans, it's as legendary as a superhero cape. Yippee-Ki-Yay, the one-liner that was never meant to last. It's the most famous line in Die Hard. Maybe even in action movie history. But here's the crazy part, Yippee-Ki-Yay, motherfucker wasn't even in the script. Bruce Willis threw it in as a joke. During filming, Willis decided to improvise the line just to get a laugh out of the crew. No one thought it would actually make it into the final cut. But when director John McTiernan saw how perfectly it fit McClane's cocky, defiant attitude, he knew they had struck gold. The line wasn't just funny, it was a defining moment for the character. It was McClane flipping the bird to Hans Gruber, letting him know that no matter how bad things got, he wasn't going down quietly. Over the years, Yippee-Ki-Yay became more than just a catchphrase, it became a battle cry. A symbol of the wisecracking, underdog action hero that Die Hard helped redefine. And to think, it all started as an offhand joke. The hidden meaning behind the hostage room, every detail in Die Hard was carefully designed, even down to the architecture. The hostage room, where Hans Gruber and his men hold their captives, wasn't just a random set. It was inspired by Fallingwater, the legendary house designed by architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Why? Because Fallingwater represents power, prestige, and, most importantly, Japanese influence in American business. At the time, many U.S. corporations were being bought by Japanese investors, and the filmmakers wanted Nakatomi Plaza to feel like a symbol of this real-world shift. The hostage room's sleek, minimalist design, with its stone walls and flowing water features, was a direct nod to Wright's work. It was a subtle way of showing that Nakatomi Corporation wasn't just another American company, it was part of a changing global economy. Most viewers never noticed this hidden message, but for those paying attention, it was a clever reflection of the world outside the movie. And there you have it. A nightmare that became a masterpiece, an improvised line that became legendary, and a TV actor who defied expectations to become one of the greatest action stars of all time. Die Hard wasn't just a movie, it redefined action cinema. If you love crazy movie facts like these, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Which fact surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments.